Hi. Was the moon landing fake? Is our government spraying us with chemtrails from the sky to control us? Does the oil and gas industry hire disaffected scientists to downplay the role of the extraction industry in man-made climate change? Is the government making an AI surveillance system to track the movements and behaviors of potential political dissidents? Does ice cream cause shark attacks? Did the main investor in the company building said alleged AI surveillance system bankroll our vice president's entire political career? Is a large number of our political leadership implicated in the Jeffrey Epstein pedophile island thing? Or is the moon perhaps just made out of cheese?
Ancient astronaut theorists say yes.
All right. I love conspiracy theories. I really, really do. And I would be lying if I told you that I didn't love conspiracy theories. Here's some of my favorites. The CIA killing Kennedy. The CIA doing a coup in Iran because the president of Iran wanted to nationalize the oil industry that was largely controlled by the British. All news being broadly owned by one company that generally favors the Republican Party. Everything being broadly owned by a handful of billionaires who are investing infinite sums of money into building out AI in order to replace the human workforce. That one's kind of dark, man. I love conspiracies. I really do. I wanted to talk about this on my video that I made about the health insurance industry, but that video was 40 minutes long, so I didn't want to make it any longer. I'm going to be talking about anti-intellectualism in this video because it is a significant cause of me being burnt out in my regular day job. So I'm going to be talking about a lot about RFK Jr., although he is not the causative agent of anti-intellectualism. Rather, I believe that he represents a deeper systemic problem in our global population, especially here in the United States, that has been getting significantly worse since 2020. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not an authority on anything. I'm just a dude who went to community college and then finished his bachelor's degree online, okay? I took some science courses and then I went to nursing school. Despite this fact, I have noticed like a general downtrend in the American public's understanding of how anything, especially science and medicine, how they work. I'm not here to defend the medical industry and big pharma. Like I can't say exactly what I would wish would happen to the Sackler family, and I'm not going to defend the clearly blatant and obvious corruption and conflicts of interest that surround the revolving door between regulatory bodies in the US government and the private sector. I think that's a massive problem, and I think that involves significantly more than just the healthcare industry. I think that's in everything. Rather, I want to explain how science and medicine actually work. Okay, so let's take a look at this graph. Graph. Okay, if you look at this graph, then you'll clearly see the relationship between ice cream sales and shark attacks. Now, it is not a particularly unreasonable conclusion to infer that this relationship implies that ice cream causes shark attacks. Now, if you don't dig deeper, that is, if you don't dig deeper. If you dig deeper, then you'll obviously come to the conclusion that there's, a third variable, like the weather. But that doesn't mean that the weather causes shark attacks either. It just means that more people are going to be swimming when it's warm outside, therefore increasing the number of people that sharks could attack and nom nom on. This is correlation, not meaning causation, and it is a principle that seems to be lost on a lot of people who do their own research. Okay, so if you never had the pleasure of getting third place in the 5th grade science fair, like me, but what they don't know is that I retroactively engaged in data manipulation and fraud because I forgot to do my lab notebook like a week before the science fair on my experiment on the best types of water and fertilizer to enhance bean plant growth. Well, whatever. I was engaging in data manipulation and fraud as an 11-year-old. Feds, come and get me. But on a more serious note, I want to talk to you about the scientific method and what the scientific method actually is and how it works, because this is how advancements are made in medical research and science in general. And medical professionals, especially doctors and researchers, are expected to have a very deep and broad understanding of all of the sciences, physics, biology, and chemistry, in order to further advance progress. So the first step in the scientific method, you are going to make an observation. Then you're going to formulate a question, like, why does this happen? And then you're going to do some background research to see if, someone's already figured it out. And then once you do that, once you make that observation, you do some background research, you're going to form a hypothesis. Now, what is a hypothesis? It is a testable, educated guess or prediction that is going to hopefully answer your question. Then you're going to design an experiment that is repeatable and it controls for variables. And then you're going to do your experiment. And then once your experiment is done, you're going to analyze your data and you're going to examine the results. And then you're going to draw a conclusion. Does your data support your hypothesis? Yes, no. If it does not, you can go back and retool your hypothesis, run the experiment again. This is how the scientific method works. Now, this is what empirical evidence is. It's data that is based on observation and experimentation, not just vibes and ideas. This is a very real thing. So this also helps to ensure objectivity. So if you do your experiment and it doesn't work, well, you can't just go back and, manipulate data unless you're a fifth grader and an 11-year-old and you want to get a good grade, and then you end up getting third place based on a lie. I mean, the fifth grade science fair, it's not exactly, the best, standards, and say that. Okay. And then, this helps with skepticism too, or it should, like if people are skeptical, they should be able to answer or they ask questions about your experiment. They can analyze it, they can demand that you proved it or what you need to change. And then, if you design your experiments correctly, then they can be reproduced. This is how science and medicine works. It's complicated. But we're not talking about fifth graders in the science fair. We are talking about institutions and people with a lot of money on the line for these experiments. So it is very complicated and complex. There's a lot of regulatory scrutiny that goes into these experiments and whatnot. So that is how the scientific method works, and that is how research works, or it should anyway. Because right now, what we are seeing is a backlash to empirical evidence, and it is mind-boggling. Now, again, like I said, I'm not here to defend the pharmaceutical industry or the medical research complex. My check from Pfizer hasn't cleared yet, so I'm good until then. I'm going to remain an opponent until they actually, authorize my payroll. I am not unaware of the very real historical harms and problems from the medical industry, like doctors recommending cigarettes, to eugenics, to experimenting on minorities and infecting them with communicable diseases to see what happens. Like, seriously, I know how unethical the medical industry is and has been. Seriously, you don't want to know how we know that the human body is 75% water. Thanks, Japan. But it isn't the 1940s anymore, where the town doctor was like the Swiss Army knife of everything. He was a surgeon, the coroner, the emergency room doctor, etc. This is the modern age. In 1950, medical knowledge doubled every 50 years. By 1980, it was every 7 years. By 2010, it was every 3.5 years. And now in 2020, it's every 73 days. That means in the year 2025, if a doctor went to medical school 15 years ago in 2010, over the course of their entire career, they've only mastered about 6% of the knowledge that medical research has revealed to us. What does this mean? It means that things are more complicated than ever, and things are changing at a rapid pace because of the availability of knowledge and empirical evidence that was based on reproducible experiments. Science and medicine is much more complicated than it was today, than it was even a decade ago. This isn't the 1700s anymore, when scientists were just like rich dudes who were doing it as a hobby. It's very, very complicated now, and it's only going to get worse through things like AI, which has actually done cool things like show us how proteins fold, which is a question that has puzzled scientists for decades. Things are just unbelievably complicated right now. And it's no wonder why the general public can't keep up with the knowledge and understanding of medical research, because even the educated professionals can't anymore. I don't blame people for being skeptical. I really don't. But this lack of understanding has opened the door for grifters and snake oil salesmen who break down complex problems and then they provide easy solutions that's easily digestible. This I do blame people for. Okay, so time for some personal anecdotes, right? Like, why does this matter to me? Like, this video is kind of an overarching series of like the reasons for like me being burnt out. So I want to tell you some real stories, obviously HIPAA and all that. But like this year, I have taken care of some patients that believe in crazy shit, and like they're like multiplying. Like it's a lot of them. I've taken care of patients that don't believe in germ theory, like the theory that bacteria and viruses are responsible for making people sick. The thing that has basically been settled science since we invented penicillin and people stopped dying from treatable infections. The thing that has been around for like a century. I thought that this stuff was settled, but it's apparently not. I've taken care of people who don't believe in vaccines. The state that I'm from, way to go, Idaho, has had measles and mumps outbreaks, which is largely due in part because of parents not getting their children vaccinated. I've taken care of patients who have had strokes and become disabled because they thought that Big Pharma is pushing blood pressure meds on them. I've had patients with diabetes who they refuse to take insulin and get managed because they don't believe in Big Pharma, so they go to naturopaths instead. And then shockingly, by the time that I'm taking care of them, they have gone into diabetic ketoacidosis. The medical literacy of the general population has fallen off a cliff, based on my anecdotal experience anyway, and this lack of medical literacy is a problem, and it is causing very real harms to people who are susceptible to believing in bullshit. I am not unsusceptible to believing in bullshit, but, I critically think about this stuff, right? There's entire industries like the supplement industry, which is unregulated by the FDA, and the American Medical Association estimates that in 2025, the unregulated supplement industry will reach $200 billion. For reference, the heavily regulated and scrutinized, correctly so, pharmaceutical industry is worth $634.3 billion. And this supplement industry is ruled by an incalculable amount of grifters like naturopaths and chiropractors who offer vulnerable people an easy solution to their complex health problem through supplements and, bullshit spine cracking things that, gets ghosts out of your spinal cord or whatever. They are profiting off of vulnerable people's suffering, and it is a huge problem. And that problem has only been exacerbated by one Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., this guy, he is the Health and Human Services Secretary. Now, what does the Health and Human Services Secretary do? Well, his primary job is installing pull-up bars in airports to improve the health of the American public. Okay, but seriously, what does the HHS secretary do? Well, he advises the president on health and welfare, overseeing major agencies like the CDC, the NIH, National Institutes of Health, Food and Drug Administration, and CMS, which is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And they manage national health policy. They advise the president on health legislation and help the president write new and help Congress write new laws, including, like ones for the Affordable Care Act. They manage and coordinate all of the different health agencies in the United States. They manage budgets. They like budgets like funding and public research and deciding what grants go to where. They prepare for public health crises and help manage emergencies. They set guidelines for Medicare and Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act marketplace, which basically controls who gets insurance from where, which is a big problem. If you don't believe me, you can go watch my previous video. And like I said, their main job is really promoting research and development into a various broad subset of diseases and how to treat them. Now, why do I not like RFK? Well, it's a lot of things. Okay, so I'm clearly not an RFK fan, but let's just talk about like some of the things he said, and then we'll go into some of the things that he's done other than, installing pull-up bars in airports, because that is super important and that is going to fix our health problems in this country. God bless you, sir. So RFK believes in some crazy shit. These are a lot of these come from his own words. So I will just kind of talk about what he believes. So RFK has claimed that Wi-Fi radiation opens up the blood-brain barrier and allows toxins to enter your brain. Wi-Fi radiation, this is his words, quote, Wi-Fi radiation opens your blood-brain barrier and all these toxins that are in your body can now go into your brain. End quote. That is not fucking how Wi-Fi works. That is not how radiation works. You have ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. Wi-Fi is non-ionizing radiation. That's fucking insane. like there's been no evidence to suggest that Wi-Fi causes your blood-brain barrier to open up. He also said that COVID-19 was ethnically targeted and that it spared Jews and Chinese people, which, by the way, is fucking insane. I don't need to tell you that, but this is what he believes. These aren't my words. These are his. He also claimed in his book that HIV is harmless and doesn't actually cause AIDS, and AIDS is caused by other things in the gay community, like taking poppers. I'm not going to get into what poppers are. If you want to know, just look it up. But that is not what causes AIDS. We have decades of research and evidence to say that HIV unequivocally causes AIDS. He also linked antidepressants and SSRIs to school shootings, which, by the way, yes, SSRI use has gone up, but that is largely a reflection of economic conditions and increased access to mental health resources. I'm not going to get into that, but they don't fucking cause school shootings. That's insane. We didn't have a lot of school shootings like 100 years ago because people were a lot less economically destitute 100 years ago than they are now. There wasn't like online radicalization. It's complicated, but it's not SSRIs. He's also compared vaccines to the Holocaust, and of course there's vaccines and autism. I'll get into that later. But he said that even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You could hide in an attic like Anne Frank did when talking about vaccines. These are not the same. I shouldn't have to tell you why. He also is like super into like raw milk, which is very weird to me. He thinks that pasteurization, which is basically just heating it up until all the bacteria die, is bad for some reason. I don't fucking know. Louis Pasteur invented pasteurization like centuries ago, and it helped, a lot of people not die. But it's just things like this that make me believe that he is a very deeply unhinged person. Like I said, I love conspiracy theories, but I can also admit that, HIV probably causes AIDS, and, vaccines aren't like the Holocaust. And the other thing that I forgot to mention, which is a personal favorite of mine, is earlier this year, he released a statement saying that Tylenol causes autism. For, if pregnant women take Tylenol, then their kids are going to be autistic, which I think is fucked up because maybe I just thought that I really liked trains. Now I'm forced to take Tylenol every day so I can get super autism. It's just very, very fucking stupid. That is all I'm going to say. Now we will get into more of what RFK has actually done as Health and Human Services Secretary and some of the things that he's done historically and the impacts that they have had. So RFK doesn't like vaccines, but has this ever led to like actual measurable harms? And the answer is unequivocally yes. So here's an actual real world example from RFK doing and fucking around and finding out about vaccines. So in 2018 in Samoa, 2 infants died after receiving an injection, which was initially thought to be a vaccine. This was obviously big news. Holy crap. Well, here's what actually happened. So 2 infants died because the nurses mixed up vaccines and pentobarbital, I think, which is a muscle relaxer. And, the infants were administered this and then they died. That is really, really tragic, but it was a medical error and this was proven in court. So after these 2 infants died, the Samoan government suspended the vaccination program, and RFK Jr. and his 501c3 nonprofit Children's Health Defense, which is basically just an anti-vax propaganda outlet, came in and they met with local anti-vaccine advocates, such as Edwin Tomasi, a coconut farmer who had no medical training, who was leading the charge against the measles vaccine. So RFK goes there and then he meets with all these anti-vaccine advocates, and then they meet with the local Samoan government, and then Children's Health Defense started flooding the area with propaganda that delegitimized and questioned the efficacy of vaccines. Okay, so RFK goes to Samoa. He meets with some anti-vax officials and the Samoan government, and they suspend their vaccination program, and the fear just kind of goes crazy. Vaccine administration rates plummet from like 74% to like 30%. Now, here's what happened. So in a population of about 200,000 people, measles just fucking exploded. So there were 5,700 cases of measles and 83 deaths, with most of them being in children and babies. So in 2019, RFK sent a letter to the Samoan prime minister, and he questioned the safety of vaccines in general and suggested that the vaccine was actually causing the measles virus and might be responsible for the deaths. So the Samoan government then goes and they arrest the anti-vaccine coconut farmer who RFK was meeting with, and arrested him for basically inciting unrest. Well, RFK Jr. was calling this dude a hero and a whistleblower, and this basically just further emboldened resistance to the Samoan government being like, okay, well, we got to start vaccinating again because our children are dying of measles. Like I said, there's 5,700 cases in 200,000 people, and 83 of them died. Okay, so like, what happened because of this? So a lot, actually. So the Samoan government basically reinstated their vaccine program, and they made it like mandatory because so many people were getting sick and so many people were dying. They went door to door to vaccinate people against measles. Vaccines work, I guess. Now, when asked about this later, RFK Jr. denied responsibility, saying, quote, "I had nothing to do with people not vaccinating in Samoa. I never told anyone not to vaccinate," when it was his organization, Children's Health Defense, that was flooding the Samoa area with anti-vaccine propaganda. I don't know, man. Seems like it might have something to do with that, right? Okay, so it's pretty clear that like RFK is just kind of a weird dude. But like, let's talk about his current tenure and what he's done thus far as the primary chairperson of installing pull-up bars in U.S. airports. Okay, so like, let's go from like less harmful and kind of funny to like more harmful on the extremes. Okay, so earlier this year, RFK directed HHS resources to investigate chemtrails, or geoengineering. He requested data on whether particulate matter in the atmosphere was being intentionally sprayed to affect human health. Now, if you don't know anything about chemtrails, it's been a conspiracy for like a very long time. And because it has like institutional legitimacy now, whenever I go on Facebook to like go on Marketplace to buy used shit that I don't need, I inevitably run into like the local Facebook groups I used to look at from my hometown. And they're now kind of chocked full of just like pictures of the sky from people thinking that they're being sprayed with chemtrails. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of harmless, I guess. It is funny. I mean, you know, there's the reality that we're spending like your and I's taxpayer money on investigating something that, you know, is really pushed by people that like to smoke crack. I don't know. So I think that one's kind of funny. And then, you know, there's also his like weird war on seed oils. If you don't know, there's like this huge push among like right-wing influencers and like fitness guys talking about seed oils. So he revoked the generally recognized as safe status for seed oils. I don't know. I think it's silly. But instead he replaced it with like, you know, recommending beef tallow, which by the way, like is proven to cause increases in heart disease. You know, saturated fats are not good for you. I mean, yeah, there's arguments saying that the food pyramid and all that is bullshit, and I actually do 100% believe that, but by replacing seed oils with saturated fats, you're just going to like give more people heart disease. So I don't know, man. I mean, if it's kind of seems like installing pull-up bars in US airports is not going to be enough to counteract, you know, people eating beef tallow. I don't know. I'm just a dude on the internet. I went to a community college. I don't really know anything. So I kind of mentioned like RFK's weird thing with raw milk, but he also like is pushing raw milk in general. It's very odd. So as part of his agenda, he protected like the sale and distribution of raw milk, which by the way, like raw milk has like E. coli, salmonella, listeria, like bad things, right? I don't know. He's championing it as like a health freedom issue, when in reality, I just want to not shit myself to death when I buy milk from the grocery store. But that's just me. So, I mean, this has actually resulted in harm. Like Illinois had some clusters of milk-related food poisoning in 2025. I don't know if they're related, but it is kind of funny. But like also at the same time that he's like pushing raw milk, he did fire like 3,500 people at the FDA, a significant portion of whom were working in food safety and inspection. He framed it as like cutting bureaucratic fat, but like, I don't know, man, if you're going to like, push raw milk onto people, then having people that are in charge of like, monitoring like food outbreaks and foodborne illnesses and stuff. I mean, that seems important, right? Because like I said, like when I go to the store and I buy something, I want to like at least make sure that someone has made sure that I'm not going to violently shit myself to death. Like that just doesn't sound like a good time. I don't know. These are just very, very stupid and silly. Okay, now let's talk about the actual like harmful things that RFK has done in his tenure as man who installs pull-up bars in airport secretary. So this year has been utter chaos for regulatory agencies in the United States government, but perhaps none more than the ones that are overseen by the HHS. So RFK has cleaned house at federal agencies like the National Institutes of Health and the Food and Drug Administration. In late 2025, they fired like hundreds of career scientists at the NIH and the CDC, and those who weren't fired were pushed out and resigned. And then he kind of promised to replace them with people who share his views. Now, again, I am not the big pharma shill. I'm waiting for my check from Pfizer to clear. So as soon as it does, my opinions will change drastically. But like, he appointed a dude named Martin Kulldorff, who was a severe critic of like COVID-19 and the government's response to it, to senior roles. And this is basically just paralyzed like normal agency functions, like, in the FDA, whose job it is to make sure that I don't violently shit myself to death. They're replacing them with like stupid people that are like ideological and not, just based in evidence and science like it should be. I don't know. Like the other thing he's done that's pretty significantly harmful actually is he restructured the advisory committee on immunization practices, which is basically like the top level people who investigate vaccines and recommend, like the childhood vaccination schedule. So you would think that, a bunch of doctors are going to sit on that board. Well, no, because he fired all of them. He fired all the DEI woke doctors and scientists because, they were in the pocket of big pharma, which is just insane. And he replaced them with people like Aaron Siri, who is an anti-vaccine lawyer because, I want a pro make America healthy again anti-vax lawyer instead of the DEI woke scientists and doctors. I don't need to tell you like how harmful this could be, but we'll see. Like this is not good. Okay, so let's talk about like actual harmful stuff again. Like this is the most recent, and this is probably going to end up being one of the most harmful because this represents like a dramatic shift in going away from like established evidence to smoking crack. So earlier this month in December 2025, for those of you watching later, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which I was just talking about, who is now staffed by like loyalists, like anti-vax lawyers, they voted to remove the recommendation that all newborns receive the hepatitis B vaccine within 24 hours of birth. They recommended screening only and vaccinating only infants who are born to mothers who test positive. So their arguments for doing this was that there is an unnecessary risk for most evidence, then that hepatitis B is primarily transmitted through sex and shared needles, and they argued that a newborn baby is at effectively zero risk of contracting the disease unless the mother is infected. Therefore, there is really no benefit and it's all risk. And they also argued, they cited animal studies, animals and people are not the same, by the way, suggesting that the aluminum inside the vaccine is it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it makes you autistic and causes neuroinflammation and causes developmental delays. They argued that the blood-brain barrier is still developing and that it poses a toxic burden. And then their final justification for doing this was that vaccine-induced immunity wanes over time, which is true, by the way. So vaccinating at birth, the child might lose immunity by the time that they are actually at risk, as a young adult who's having sex and, experimenting with drugs, whatever. So they would need boosters anyway. Now, it's important to know that, the Hep B vaccine is not actually just given for hepatitis B. So let's talk about the actual consensus medical evidence that we've had since the 1980s for vaccinating infants for hepatitis B within 24 hours of giving birth. So one of the big problems, right, and these recommendations come from the American Association of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Family Physicians, so not stupid people. Maternal blood tests for hepatitis B are not perfect. There are false negatives, there's lab errors, and then there's cases where the test results are lost or not communicated. That happens all the time. So without that dose, if a mother is actually positive, but the chart says negative or the medical team doesn't know, the baby goes home unprotected. And if a newborn catches hepatitis B, they have a 90% chance of developing chronic lifelong infection. So this is important to know because hepatitis B affects infants much differently than it affects adults. So up to a quarter of these infants will eventually die of liver cancer or cirrhosis or another issue like that. So this dose acts as a fail-safe against all the errors that could be introduced as just, a part of working in a hospital. Let me tell you, as someone that works in the ICU, I've taken care of several patients who have died of liver failure. And that is one of the worst ways to go, let me tell you. You bleed out of every hole and you become swollen and you become yellow and you become confused and you lose your mind, and the fix for that is to give you lactulose to make you poop all the ammonia out. It is not a good way to go. Let me just say that. The other thing, too, is that there can often be hidden transmission in households. So, infants can catch hepatitis B from infected family members other than the mother, through contact with, open sores or sharing items. It's pretty common. So, even if the mother doesn't test positive because she doesn't have it and she gives birth to an infant that is negative, they can still contract it, and it's very bad for them. Like I said, the hepatitis B vaccine also helps prevent liver cancer in young adults. In Taiwan, the rate of liver cancer in children and young adults dropped by 75% when they implemented this vaccine policy of giving infants the hepatitis B vaccine early, within 24 hours of birth. So by, only screening for it, we're really missing out on a huge public health benefit is what I'm saying. And vaccines are safe. The hepatitis vaccine or the hepatitis B vaccine has been used for decades. There's no causal link between vaccines and autism, autoimmune disorders, or developmental issues. The amount of aluminum in the vaccine is low. It's less than what infants ingest from formula or breast milk within the first 6 months of life. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but it's really, really not, especially when we have an entire generation of people who smoked asbestos filtered cigarettes and got lead poisoning from leaded gasoline and lead paint. I don't know, man. I don't know. It just seems very stupid, short-sighted, silly, and this will do a lot of harm in the long run. Okay, so we've covered a lot in this video. We've covered anti-intellectualism. We've talked about RFK and vaccines. We've talked about what the guy installing pull-up bars in U.S. airports has actually done. So realistically, this is a video about another thing that has been causing me to be burned out. And why is this causing me to be burned out? Well, I like to rely on evidence. There has been, thus far, no evidence for anything that has been suggested. And honestly, there's a lot of evidence to the contrary. So we're basically just abandoning the scientific method, and we are abandoning the way that research gets done and that decisions are made. And it ultimately is going to bring harm to our patients. But because now we have this dude in charge of like everything, it has given a lot of like cranks institutional legitimacy to basically shill and take advantage and grift from innocent people who might have medical problems that can't be addressed, and they are looking for a solution, and the solution that people are offering them is bullshit. And that really, really upsets me. So when I, have to take care of a patient who, doesn't believe that they have diabetes because his naturopath said that they don't, it really starts to wear on me. And when you have that combined with the fact that the health insurance industry is actively like stealing your money, it's really hard to maintain motivation to want to continue, caring for people when you're just getting shit on from every side. I don't necessarily blame people for being skeptical of the medical field, and I think that they should be. Like I said, the medical field has done a lot of unethical shit, but it should be healthy skepticism based in evidence, and you should know how to actually analyze evidence. And if you don't, well, then you got to learn how to, because there's so much bullshit and nonsense. And now with, AI, there's just like AI slop fucking everywhere. You really need to think. You need to critically think about the things that are going on right now, because you might agree with RFK's vaccine stance, but I guarantee you it's because you don't actually understand the evidence. And if you think that you do, well, then you're probably somewhere on the Dunning-Kruger curve right before you fall into the valley of Mount Stupid. I am not an expert. Like I said, I'm just a dude who went to community college, and I want people to have what's best for them. I want people to promote realistic, evidence-based things that are going to benefit them. And so far this year, I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing the opposite. And like I said, shit is just getting worse. It's getting more stupid. We are legitimizing grifters and cranks, and all it's going to do is it's going to cause more vulnerable people to be taken advantage of. And that really, really bothers me. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that it's not anything that's been going on. That's all I have for you. Thanks for watching.